podcast. You heard that right. Podcast, I'm calling it. And we got so much positive feedback from the session I recorded with Antonio last week, which has been really great. So I'm ready to call this a podcast, even if it's only seasonal for the Oscars. But if you tuned in last episode, Antonio and I didn't cover all the categories. There were 23 categories. We only did 8 of them. So I've asked my former grad school office mate and longtime friend, Greg Cass, to join me to break down what's happening in 7 more categories. Hey, Greg. What's going on?
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me on. I will say I did a lot of talking back to your last episode with Antonio. Not that I thought you two were wrong. I just wanted to be part of the conversation. And I was imagining like, oh, when I get on, what I'm going to say. And then I was like, oh, right. He took all the really fun categories, but we got some good stuff to talk about. So I'm looking forward to this as well.
We do. And you're doing the like yeoman's work of all the shorts today. So I tip my hat to you, because that's usually those are the categories that I think when I'm pressed for time, I usually ignore or don't get to. So I appreciate that we're going through it today. But before we get started, I want to just, let everyone know that you have the distinction out of all my cinephile friends, and I have a few. You're the only one who sees every single Oscar nominee every year. So that is every single film that has any kind of nomination. And so I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about that. How did you start doing that? You know, what motivates you? How do you actually make the time to see all these movies?
Yeah. So I started, I think 4 years ago, I had a friend who was really committed, a friend other than you, a local friend who, was really committed to see all the Best Picture. And I did that with him, except I believe that was the Green Book year. And I was like, nope, it's not going to win. I'm not watching that trash. And then of course it won. So after that year, I decided, oh, let me actually push that a little further and try to see how many I can see. And, you know, it is a lot of movies. It tends to be between 50 and 60 on a given year. Of course, it can fluctuate a lot depending on how many overlap and so on. But I realized that it just makes me a better film watcher. I love a good popcorn blockbuster, but it's like such a small slice of what's out there and what's being created. So I have, the last 3 years I've managed to see them all. I think last year there was a documentary, I'm not going to remember the title, that wasn't released until the Tuesday after the ceremony. Why? I don't know. I mean, that seems like the worst possible plan for it. So I did not finish by the ceremony last year, but the first year and then this year again, I've finished. And this year I finished up earlier than ever. So, to the question of how, this year the key to success was just seeing a lot throughout the year. You know, this year in particular, a lot of stuff was spread out. So, you know, the fact that Everything Everywhere is going to absolutely dominate, and I had checked that off by like the first week of April, right. Made a big difference.
No, that's amazing. And also, I think we can give you a free pass. I think you're being too hard on yourself. I feel like you should set it to what is legally available. That should be the goal, right? What at the time of the ceremony. But yeah, it's still incredible. I'm still jealous. Like I have a similar thing, but my scale is much smaller. I try to make sure I see all the Best Picture nominees, and that's sort of my checklist for the year, which is like infinitesimal compared to what you do. And I still only just finished last weekend. I saw Avatar over the weekend to close it out. So hats off to you for sure.
Well, this year was the first year I'd ever had the 10 done the day the nominations came out. I rarely have had the Best Pictures all completed by that. So that was kind of a stroke of luck depending on what was nominated.
Yeah, that's really good. Some years you really just can't tell. And it's like, oh, I haven't seen any of these.
Yeah. And just because of our conversation tonight, I want to plug, people should really make the shorts a priority when they're thinking of this project, because it's really easy, because they have a night, where you can go for the price of one ticket and see all the live action, and then a second ticket for all the animated. So I know I have the beauty of having like 5 art house theaters near me, and that's a privilege. But if other people have the opportunity, I really recommend it. It's a fun night because it's all nerdy film people there, and everybody's kind of checking off and mumbling to each other but during the credits. So it's a lot of fun, and I recommend it.
Amazing. How long was it this year when they're all together?
Neither was 2 hours, or over 2 hours, I should say. Actually, the last 2 years I've done live action and animated all in one go. I go watch 5, grab a burger, and then go back and watch the other 5. And that's even more insane. And there are a few people who've done that with me, and we're like, grizzled war veterans by the end, especially because shorts can be a little heavy. Even if they're not long, there's some that are really deep and painful.
That's very, very, very true. All right. So we're going to dig into 3 features categories. So it's international feature, documentary feature, animated feature, as well as Greg's saying, the 3 short film categories. It's animated, doc, live action. And then we're going to throw in score at the end for good measure. That was mostly because I didn't know where else to put it, and we needed to divide this up evenly. So are you ready to get started?
I am ready to get started, and I'm so grateful you divided score my way instead of best original song. So yes, maybe those should go together, but I don't want to talk about songs.
Sure. So yeah, spoiler, right after this, later tonight, I'm going to be recording with PT to finish off the rest of the categories, including best song. So, and he seems really pumped to talk about that. So
nice.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. So as a reminder, if you didn't if you didn't listen to the other episode we did with Antonio, we are going to talk about, for each of these categories, who we think will win and who we think should win. So just keep that in mind, is that if we think it will win, that doesn't necessarily mean that's our favorite or that's the personal preference. That's what the should win should be. Right. All right. So let's start with international feature. Greg, what do you have for your will win and should win?
All right. So do we want to do a quick rundown of the nominees to remind people? Or?
Oh, that's probably a good idea, especially for these.
Sure. Categories. I have them right here. So we have All Quiet on the Western Front, Argentina 1985, Close, EO, and The Quiet Girl. So, starting with will win, I think this is a complete lock. If you're in your Oscar pool, you can bet on this one. It's All Quiet on the Western Front. A high quality film, a prestige film, just the perfect prize to give this, and then, move on to the American films for the main categories. So I think there's no doubt that that's going to win. And I'm honestly not that upset about it. I think that's a really good choice out of these. I enjoyed all of these. I will say I made the unusual choice of watching The Quiet Girl actually without subtitles, and that had to do with my access to it. And it's interesting because it's an Irish film in an Irish language, and there are English portions in it, but I actually entirely followed it, and it's close enough, and the actors are just expressive enough that was a fun choice. And then we get another donkey movie with EO. So I think it's All Quiet is definitely going to win.
I would agree with that. I think, yeah, as you said, to me, this is the minimum of what All Quiet will win, right? It's like this is where its night starts, is winning this, because it has a Best Picture nomination. And then the questions, I'm kind of with my total Oscar pool, sort of going back and forth of like, how many can I give this reasonably? How big a night is it going to have, compared to Everything Everywhere? But yeah, this is not a controversial will win or prediction. It's almost certainly going to win. Even though Argentina in 1985 confused everybody when it won the Golden Globe, right? I remember people being like, huh? Okay.
I swear Amazon paid for that because it was streaming on Amazon, and it's like it instantly popped to the top of their charts. I'm like, I don't know how it won that Golden Globe.
Yeah, for sure. So I have to confess that I have actually only seen All Quiet on the Western Front from all the nominees, which is embarrassing. But I did watch all the trailers in preparation for this to just kind of have some context. And honestly, my should win is I'm writing in RRR. I don't usually like to do that. I like to go from what the nominees, but RRR was like one of my favorite films of the year. And it just wasn't India's submission. India submitted another film as their bid for the Oscar nomination and didn't get it. So, I feel like this is my one place where I can plug that, potentially during this discussion. So, but I will say that out of the trailers, EO was the one that I'm like, oh, I'm such a fool. Why didn't I see this movie? It looks like something I would really love.
Well, again, you ask, how do I see all the movies? I saw EO in the theater on Super Bowl Sunday. So there was nobody else in the building, let alone in the theater. And I was there, watching EO the donkey, have some adventures. EO, I completely agree on the trailer. The filmmaking and the cinematography are really great. But it's kind of a preachy kind of morality tale thing at the end of it. And it's kind of like, I think I knew.
War Horse? I feel like that's the last movie that was sort of like based on an animal.
I don't remember War Horse well, but I will say what's interesting about EO is it is entirely about the donkey. So there is language, there's dialogue. It's not like a silent film, but it follows the donkey, and the characters that are in it just disappear entirely. And there are parts of War Horse like that, but War Horse is more about the relationship in the end. So it almost feels like something like, I don't know, almost like a Babe movie. I know the Babe, the animals talk. The animals don't talk in EO. But I actually, when I was sitting there, I'd forgotten if it was international feature or documentary. And at first, I think I thought it was documentary. And when I could tell, like, oh, this is constructed in narrative, I don't think this is a documentary at all. So I figured that out.
Real. What?
No, I will say I am, really upset that you cheated in this category, and will say I would never cheat, but my should win was also RRR, which I put in because it really deserves this credit. And I think, this whole situation is just a reminder that the way international feature film get nominated is just ridiculous. So the fact that the country nominates or picks a nominee, and then all of those singular nominees from each country get picked. I also recently heard on a podcast that the country gets the award in many cases. So like,
not the director.
You think about these great international filmmakers who won Oscars, and they're probably sitting in like the cultural ministry of their country. That's all a bunch of phooey, and it's outdated.
Yeah, and especially now that the Academy is becoming more international, which is a story that, you and I, as avid listeners of Oscar podcasts and movie podcasts, hear all the time. And so I feel like there really is no excuse now, because, and especially in recent years, we've seen international feature and best picture, or just other categories, sort of like overlap a little bit more than, whereas they never would probably, 10 or 15 years ago. So yeah, RR. It's a raw deal. I feel like it would be actually probably the front runner potentially in this category, or potential spoiler to upset if it had been actually nominated. I just love it because it's epic in the best way possible. It's really over the top, but so well done. And the story is really gripping, like the relationship between these two characters, and sort of how that evolves and sort of shifts and changes over time. And then, I don't know, it's a fist pump kind of movie, and I love it.
It is. And so, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and that's why I would give it to it. My should win from the actual list, I think All Quiet is very deserving. So I put that down. If you were going to yell at me and make me pick one from the list, I would pick All Quiet. There are things in that movie that are going to haunt me forever. A few scenes that I won't mention specifically, but, well worth a watch, and a good war film that manages to not glorify war.
Right.
So, I think
which I think is why it's getting
winner.
a lot of awards attention, to be honest. It's a really successful anti-war film.
Well, and to have Germany own that story now, because the really famous version from the 30s, which I recently watched, is American, and it is very American. So to have Germany tell that story that is from one of their authors, I think was a great choice and really fitting winner for that category.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Documentary feature. What's your will win and should win?
All right. So documentary feature is usually a really hard part of the list to get through. And while this is not a incredibly uplifting set of films, I will say it's a very diverse group of films, which made this a lot better to get through. I believe 2 years ago there were two nominees that were very hard to watch documentaries about the war in Syria. One was about an underground emergency room, one was about children, and it was like a really, really tough watch. And documentaries should be that, and they should be important. So the set of films here are beautiful in how different they are. All That Breathes, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, Fire of Love, A House Made of Splinters, and Navalny. So will win. I'm putting my money on Navalny. Navalny is a profile of the largest critic of Vladimir Putin, his political opponent. I think as I watched this, I was remembering like dribs and drabs of news stories over the years, but there were multiple attempts to assassinate him. And it's about his survival and him actually, there's some great kind of All the President's Men sequences of him investigating his own attempted assassination. And it's just jaw-dropping, like, what they caught in those moments and what, he did and he figured out. Now Navalny the man is currently in a prison. We hear not doing well, and we hear being regularly tortured by the forces of Vladimir Putin to, essentially make up a confession that he's an American agent or something and get, exiled forever or executed. So all of that is swirling around this film in a way that it's just going to be the perfect way for Hollywood to say, we hate you, Putin. We're going to celebrate this film. I think that's why it won the BAFTA. And, that's why I think it'll carry the night. Should win go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah. I was just going to say that, like, I feel like the conversation about Navalny's chances has really changed over time, probably for the reason that you're talking about, because I remember before our nominations came out, everyone was like, is it going to make it in? Right. And that was something I've heard a couple podcasters say, is that was its biggest challenge to overcome. And now that it's in, it's quickly shot up to the top because it's so topical and timely and has is politically something that voters can feel good about. And also because it's just a really good thriller for a documentary. Like if you didn't tell me that it was a true story and that Navalny was an actual person, I would have maybe mistakenly thought that this was like a mockumentary about a spy thriller or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, it's just, and the way that it's edited has a lot to do with that. Just the fact that Navalny, the way that they interview him makes him seem so incredibly charming.
Yeah.
It's just like insane. I was like, this guy is basically a movie star. And what is this movie that we're watching? How is this a documentary? So I think, but yeah, I was sorry, I was interrupting your should win.
Well, and I'll just put a cap on what you just said. It is edited, it's co-edited or co-produced by CNN, so it feels like a long form 60 minutes piece or something like that, or like you're noting with his charisma, it's like a campaign video in some ways, but it all just works. And I really was shocked at a few of this. Should win is so hard because I really enjoyed a lot of these. Looking at the list, I would not be upset if any of the 5 won, just to get that on the record. All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is a really important film about the activism against the Sacklers, kind of merged with a portrait of Nan Goldin, the artist, and it's really, really good and a reminder of this kind of issue that we've forgotten. Fire of Love is just a beautiful archive of footage that they kind of fumbled their way through. Poor Werner Herzog released a second documentary based on that same archive of footage this year. And I think, I'm sure both parties had it in the works for a long time. It's like they both have to be bummed because by all accounts, Werner Herzog did it to better effect, but nobody watched because everybody's like, we already watched this film this year. So the one that's going to stick with me, and Jen and I saw each other in person the morning after I watched this, is House Made of Splinters, which is a portrait of a Ukrainian orphanage. And when I heard that description, I assumed it was about the war. It is actually set entirely before the war. All the project was completed before that, or the footage was shot anyway. I saw it in a moment when I was away from my 2 children, but the way they get their cameras so intimately with these orphans and share their stories. And there's this one boy named Kolka who broke my heart because he's, that classic, 10, 12-year-old who you can see the good in him, but you can see like the older boys are kind of pulling him away and he's right on the edge. And then, they break up, spoilers, I guess, they break up his family. So he has to say goodbye to his little sister on camera. You get this little boy wishing his sister goodbye, and putting some ABCs on a chalkboard and saying, you got to learn these. You have to be perfect. And it destroyed me. So, it's a smaller film. It's, it is political and kind of tied to the moment, but I think it's going to get lost in these bigger films. So that's my pick for should win.
Oh, yeah, that's a good pitch. Although now that you've described it more, I don't know if I could watch that.
Yeah, it's rough. Any parent is going to be destroyed by
it. Right. Yeah, I think so. So again, full confession, I actually have only seen Navalny out of all the nominees. So I feel like I'm not really qualified to weigh in on the should win here, though I'm totally happy with Navalny winning because I really liked it. And I saw it last year at Sundance virtually. And again, as I said earlier, was just sort of blown away that it was a documentary. Documentaries actually aren't really, like, I appreciate documentaries. They're not something I necessarily seek out unless it's in an Oscars context, honestly. But every time I watch one, I'm like, these are great. Like, I should watch more, documentaries. So I don't know what's wrong with me. But yeah, this one I think was like, to me, had just like more of a, and I think that's why it's going to win. It's because it has more of that populist appeal. What's interesting is that Fire of Love was actually a frontrunner for a really long time. But then everyone kind of put the asterisk at the end of it because it's mostly found footage. And apparently the documentary branch kind of not frowns upon it, but they just don't want to reward. That's not as challenging as doing your own interviews and kind of cutting together archival footage with sort of like current interviews and current narration and stuff like that. So I think that's sort of why it's been dropping down in the running. But I've also heard people say that All That Breathes could be also a spoiler. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. And like I said, if you told me, it's the morning after the Oscars and any of those won, I'd be perfectly happy. I think these are all really fun. I just want to put in a plug. These are all very accessible this year, which is very rarely the case. So All That Breathes is on HBO already. Fire of Love is on Disney Plus. I don't think House Made of Splinters is available in the US. It is a BBC production. So if you have a VPN, you can see it. And then, I believe All the Beauty and the Bloodshed was purchased by HBO. So it's coming there eventually. It may just not have made its way there yet. It had a limited theatrical run here in Boston. So I caught it then. So
nice. All right. Animated feature. So this one I feel like is also going to be an easy category to at least to discuss the prediction. But what's your will win for animated feature?
The other category that I'd seen everything on nomination day, thank you Parenthood, that has allowed me to see these films all many times in most cases. So, you're absolutely right. The will win without a doubt is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I mean, riding on the charisma of Guillermo and his small wooden puppet boy that he takes, on the red carpet with him, this will absolutely win. You can't ask for a better spokesman than Guillermo, really. Everybody likes him. He's really affable and just funny. And so, but all that aside, it's also a really good film. It did something really interesting, with Pinocchio and changed it, while doing some kind of gorgeous stop motion animation. And so, while it may be kind of the obvious choice, I don't think it's a bad choice.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is my will win and should win, because it really took me by surprise. I didn't know much about it other than it was an adaptation of Pinocchio by Guillermo del Toro. And so, I mean, that was enough to sell me on it. I was like, yes, I'm definitely seeing this movie. But I feel like how melancholy it was and how like political it was and poignant really took me by surprise. I think I didn't, for those of you who haven't seen it, the main difference I would say is that the context is shifted historically so that it's in fascist Italy during Mussolini. So a lot of the backdrop of the story is about that. And so it's very, very different than the Disney adaptation, which is probably most people's point of reference. And also I tried watching this with my kids and
Same.
they got too creeped out by Pinocchio.
Yeah.
So is it, and I think I remember in one of the acceptance speeches for a precursor award, Guillermo del Toro said, this is a movie that's not for kids, but it's one that you could watch and talk about with your children or something like that. He was very specific in his wording about it. And I would agree, you know, my children are probably younger than maybe what he was thinking of, but I think it definitely is dark in a lot of ways, but in a good way, in a beautiful way. And we also can't talk about Pinocchio unless we give a shout out to Ewan McGregor as Dapper, the Dapper Cricket, who's writing his memoirs, which was one of my favorite parts.
Absolutely,
good frame narrative.
I watched this with my son when we were on COVID quarantine because it came out the Friday we were locked in a bedroom, the two of us living for a week. And he had much the same reaction as your kids. He watched it all the way through, but he was like, I don't think this was, you know, something I should have seen. And he's not entirely wrong. So absolutely a shout out to Ewan. Ewan had a great year last year and capped it off with a nice voice performance. You know, again, wouldn't be upset about Pinocchio winning. I really struggled with my should win. I almost went for Turning Red. I think that movie got overlooked, partially because Disney put it on Disney Plus instead of in theaters. It absolutely deserved a theatrical release. And it's such a wonderful kind of story of puberty disguised as something kind of fun and cute and kid friendly. The fact that neither of its songs, I don't believe, are in Best Original Song is a crime. They did some amazing 90s boy band songs. And you know, this director, Domi Shi, was the writer of I've already forgotten the name of it, the short, Bao. From a few years ago, and kind of that was her calling card and got this chance. And it's such a wonderful movie, and it, you know, is real in a way that kids respect and that makes, you know, the anti-woke crowd angry, but it's really good and, you know, is a really good mother-daughter story. Some part of me thinks if Everything Everywhere wasn't dominating, the fact that this is such a strong mother-daughter immigrant story would really be getting more attention. But I went with Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, for my, should win.
Of course you did.
I loved this. You know, it is so twee and so adorable, but it totally worked for me. I think, the Marcel character, I actually kind of missed the boat on the Marcel internet videos. I'd seen a couple of them, but had never kind of obsessed over them as others did. So I went into this film. I saw it in the theater back in, August, I think it came out. And I didn't expect too much and, you know, not to get too personal, but I had, an aunt at the time who was, passing away. It was, you know, it was clear this was going to happen and we'd all kind of prepared ourselves. And so there's a death in the film and, little Marcel sings this beautiful song and I'm just like, a sobbing mess in the theater, just like connecting it to my real life and connecting it to this. But it's really beautiful. It would be really interesting to watch this one with kids. I'm not sure what they'd make of it. There's nothing offensive in it, but you know, the narrative they wrap around all of this to kind of make the whole Marcel experience work is really wonderful. And the fact that Isabella Rossellini is in it is also just kind of incredible. So definitely worth your time. I'm going to give it the should win vote for mine.
No, that's a really good pick. I love this. Honestly, this is such a strong category for me. I mean, not just because I've actually seen all the nominees, unlike some of the other categories we talked about, but that I love every single one of these movies that's on here. I've seen them multiple times, and you know, again, it's like you, because we're both parents of small children. Like that's definitely a factor here. To go to Marcel, I didn't sit my kids down with me specifically to watch this, but I had this on while they were around just to see if it would catch their attention. And Marcel as a character definitely did, but it was like for a little like 2 or 3 minute spurts. So like they'd be playing and then they walk by and they'd be like, that's a shell. Like what is going on? And then but the story couldn't sustain them because I think it was too subdued. You know what I mean? Like I think, so I think maybe if they were a little older, they'd be really into it. They definitely liked the animation style. I think that's what kind of caught their attention visually. And honestly, that's my favorite part of the movie is just all the little the production design on this is incredible with all the little miniatures that they make. And it's so clever that it's like, oh, if a shell were alive and living in someone's Airbnb, right? Like this is what it would look like. It's so funny. But yeah, Yeah, and is it Jenny Slate is the
Yes.
voice
Yep.
for yeah, so yeah, the voice acting in it is just stellar as well.
Well, and it
You're
is
right, it does have kind of like a tweet is a good way to put it. Like it does have a very specific brand of humor that if you're not into it from the jump, I feel like it's a hard part to stay with it.
Well, and it's not Jenny Slate doing her kind of standard voice from SNL or Parks and Rec or even Everything Everywhere, which, you know, she was up on stage for the SAG Awards. It's like, oh, right, she's a part of that movie.
Everyone forgot she was in that
movie. Because it is kind of an affectation of voice she came up with that I think they developed the character in response. I think she was dating the co-director or the co-creator at the time, and they just kind of were goofing around one night, and she came up with the voice, and he built the character around that. So it's great. I love it getting its recognition, and she's done a few good interviews. And if nothing else, on Spotify, you can listen to Marcel sing, and you should definitely do that because it's beautiful.
Amazing. I want to give out a shout out to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, because that movie just floored me in terms of I actually was not that into the Shrek franchise. Like I watched and enjoyed the movies. Actually, this Puss in Boots movie actually caused me to go back and watch the first Shrek, and I was like, oh wait, I love this way more than I remember. Which maybe, I don't know, maybe my humor has evolved since then or devolved. But I think this movie just was so sharp and kind of well structured and well edited, and Antonio Banderas is amazing as like Puss in Boots going through a midlife crisis. And I just, it very much is influenced by Into the Spider-Verse, in terms of its animation style, because all of the action scenes are sort of this kind of sped up, splashier animation style, that's very much like a departure from the main story style. So, but I was like, this movie has no business being this good. It's a way, especially for like a sequel. I don't even know what number this is in terms of the other Puss in Boots movies.
I think there have been a lot of Spider-Verse pretenders, and this is the closest to that spirit. Yeah. Certainly, I don't think it met it, but it got pretty close, like you're saying. My son loved this movie. He said it was the best movie he's ever seen. And he then started watching the Netflix cartoon Puss in Boots, and it's so budget basement animation. It's like, It's so terrible. So when you said that, what you said about Shrek, it's like, yeah, Shrek died under the weight of terrible sequels, and you forget like, oh, there was something to the original, right? And I feel like the Puss in Boots brand, if it existed before this, had really suffered from that kind of oversaturation and just cheap products, which DreamWorks seems to make a lot of money off of and seems to be part of how they're sustaining their model. But to actually see it return and get this really big screen treatment, fantastic voice for performances. I was telling my wife when we were watching it, if you pitched a movie where Florence Pugh was the adopted daughter of Olivia Colman and the guy who plays Mac in Indiana Jones, I'm forgetting his name. He was the villain in Black Widow too. Hopefully people remember his name. But if you pitch that movie, it would be like Oscar bait for sure. And yeah, she's called Goldilocks and they're bears, but it's that storyline and it totally works, and it's a lot of fun. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I was like, oh, we're getting like a tiny Guy Ritchie movie in this, in this other movie. It's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, highly recommend that. It's because I think it was not on my radar until actually, because came out right before the semester started, and a bunch of my students during our first day of class icebreaker, which I usually ask like, what did you watch over break? Easily half of the students said Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and they're like, no, it's really good. So I was like, oh, I guess I have to watch this, and they were right.
That actor's name is Ray Winstone, which I definitely didn't Google while you were talking.
That's right. No, good. That's what you should have been doing. My kids, if they were to choose from this list, they would choose The Sea Beast, though, which I was super proud that I predicted that as a nomination, because that wasn't actually on a lot of people's lists. It was pretty far down, especially on Gold Derby, I think. But it's just a really solid movie. The story's good. They enjoyed it. It wasn't too dark. It was just enough. It had some high adventure. They love the giant crab. So if you have kids, I would definitely recommend that. That's on Netflix.
The fact that Lightyear came out in theaters this year, and I think 3 of these movies really didn't, is just disturbing.
that's
Like, what are we
oh
doing? Like, Lightyear is not the most awful thing in the world, but it is nowhere near the quality of any of these five. And it's just so crazy how the market in animation is working, particularly right now. Maybe as streaming services are losing a bit of steam, we'll see the return of the theatrical animated movie, because Puss in Boots was also a hit. Like, it did big money at a time when families were going to Avatar, but still, with younger kids got out to Puss in Boots. My son would have seen it 3 or 4 times in the theater if I'd let him. He wanted to go the next day, even after the first time. I did not allow it.
That's amazing. Selma Hayek, also amazing in that movie.
Yes.
And the chemistry she has with Antonio Banderas is great. All right. So next up is animated short, which I think we probably should have been doing this from the start, but I will read all the nominees just to kind of get us started, and then I'll let you go. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. So that's an Apple TV Plus viewing. The Flying Sailor, which I believe is the New Yorker. I just watched all of these in the past 3 days, so that's why it's fresh where I watched them. Ice Merchants, which I feel like was also on the New Yorker site. My Year of Dicks, which Riz Ahmed cracked up during the nominations announcement. That was by far my favorite part of that, where he just snickered in a very juvenile way. And then An Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake, and I Think I Believe It, which I feel like Riz Ahmed also was tickled by, because I think he had to read those two probably back to back. But yeah, so what's your take on this category?
It's a really fascinating category this year. And you're right. The New Yorker had a huge run in the shorts. I think they had 1 in each category plus the 2 here, like you noted, which also just makes them all very accessible. At least when I worked on the animated shorts, there was only one. The ostrich one wasn't available online. Has that changed? Did you watch it? It
has. I managed to watch that. It was on Vimeo.
Yeah, I think sometimes the creators just want them to be seen, so they finally just release them on a platform they can control like that. It's a really weird category. So, in these, it's hard to define a will win because there's not as much talk and buzz around these in a lot of cases. But I will say I did listen to the Vanity Fair Little Gold Men kind of overview of these today, so I can throw in what they said would win. So their will win for this category was My Year of Dicks. And one of the critics pointed out, if all else fails, go with the funniest name, because that's what the voters will have stuck in their head when the time comes. But My Year of Dicks, I believe the creator, Sarah Gunnarsdottir, will apologize for the pronunciation of that. I think she was a critic on Television Without Pity, which was one of those websites that had this huge effect on the kind of critic class back when it was a popular. I know whenever you talk about West Wing, that's always part of the conversation because it was so important in that era. And so she's well liked and well respected, and they just all thought this was good. And My Year of Dicks is good. It's funny. They rightfully pointed out there's no visible penis in My Year of Dicks, but there is one in The Flying Sailor, because the Flying Sailor is nude flying through the air. My will win, I think the safe money is on The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. This was on Apple TV and kind of pushed in their big, kind of, the thing that plays whenever you leave your Apple TV on too long, over Christmas break. And so I think a lot of people put that on. I think it's connected to a children's book, that's very popular, and it has, some splashy, celebrity voices. Idris Elba, I believe, is in it, and some others. So, Vanity Fair rightfully pointed out it's kind of just thin and silly, in so many ways, but, it's got that kind of Hallmark travel mug wisdom.
It's very saccharine. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's just going to make the older Academy members go for it. So that's probably my will win. My choice for should win is An Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake, and I Think I Believe It. It is absolutely the most bizarre on this list, and it is a very meta story, essentially about a stop motion animated doll that realizes that he's a stop animation doll. And I started watching it online, and I actually thought for a moment that I had gotten some weird behind the scenes video of it instead of the real thing. But that's part of the gimmick. And it ends, I don't want to spoil it because it is a short watch and people can just Google it, but it's really fun. And if you like that kind of meta humor, it felt very Community to me, or maybe Rick and Morty in a kind of not gross out way. So that was my favorite of the 5.
The titular ostrich in this cracked me up. I was like, this is amazing. And then I was actually sad that he wasn't in the whole thing. I was like, I want more of this ostrich. Like, he seems cool. But yeah, I think for me, this was like The Matrix crossed with Wallace and Gromit crossed with The Office.
Yeah.
Kind of like that's the vibe that it gave.
I like how I'm nodding. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. You're spot on. Good job. And everybody listening is going to be like, what? Like, how do you?
Now you have to watch it, everybody. Yeah. It was, it's to me, it's not quite my should win, though it was, because I picked something a little artsier, but it was almost there. I was like, oh, this is making me happy in a way that I did not expect. But yeah, I think, I am also going with the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse as my will win for basically mostly the same reason you said. I think this was before I knew I'd have to prepare for this episode. This was the one I had just already seen because of what you just described, where like it was like over Christmas vacation with my kids. I was like looking for something that was not just like Paw Patrol for them to watch. I'm like, what could they get into? And this just popped up on Apple TV, and I was like, oh, great. And it looks, the animation style and the fact that it's about a mole, a fox, and a horse, like, I was like, I'm in. I was like, this seems like it's going to be great. This seems like it's just for me. It had kind of like the Snowman vibes. If you remember that classic animated, like Christmas special or movie, or I guess it's a short maybe. But then when we started watching it, my kids actually lasted a long time. They got maybe halfway through before they got distracted by something else. But I was just like, what is this even about? I don't even like it's literally just these 4 characters in the title just sort of wandering around together, spewing aphorisms at each other about being kind and like, which in theory is like nice, but like it doesn't actually go. I feel like it doesn't really go anywhere. And so for that reason, it's definitely, I think that's my least favorite out of all the nominees. My should win, I ended up actually going with My Year of Dicks, because, and I never would have guessed that just by looking at this list. And so to me, it was the mixed media aspect of it. I thought was really cool and worked and actually like supported the story in a really nice way. That it kind of like, it's divided up into these these different chapters or parts. And each one is kind of like playing around with a different animation style, but then there's also live action in between. So it's like a really interesting mixture of different mediums and genres, in a way that I really liked. And then I ended up picking it because it really turned me around on it, because in the first 30 seconds, I was like, oh, like this is a lot of angsty teenagers, exploring their sexuality. Like, I don't know if I can deal with this right now. And then it really won me over because the character development, and the writing is just really, really, really good. And I feel like it was the best version of that type of story that I've seen. There was actually a film at Sundance last year. I'm not going to remember who the famous comedian is that wrote it. It's the creator of Girls, the HBO.
Lena Dunham.
Yes, thank you. So she made a film that had a very similar premise that I hated, because it was just like, it was trying too hard to be salacious and kind of like bold and sex positive in a way that like ended up kind of like undermining what the story it was trying to tell. Whereas this, I thought, felt like so much more genuine than that. I'm like, oh, this is what that other movie was trying to do. It's just doing it well. And in a much shorter amount of time. So that actually would be my pick, but I really like, the Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake is a close second probably. And I also really liked Ice Merchants. Though it was too sad for me to actually, like, I'm probably never going to watch it again because it was very sad, but it was very well done. And Flying Sailor, it was fine. I don't know. I have no problem with it, but
what Little Gold Men taught me about, and I share this with you as another person from the Boston area, the incident in Flying Sailor. It's a large explosion of a cargo ship in a harbor, which happened in Halifax. And Halifax was leveled, and this sailor is flying through the air after the explosion, and there you go, Flying Sailor. What I didn't know is Boston sent a boat full of nurses. They were the first city to respond when word came that Halifax had been devastated. And that's why every year Halifax sends us a Christmas tree to this day, is to say thank you for the boat full of nurses that went up to there. So, thank you to Little Gold Men for teaching me that. But yeah, both Flying Sailor and Ice Merchants, they were really creative in terms of visuals, but just didn't ultimately stick with me. And I'd be very happy if either My Year of Dicks or An Ostrich pulled it out over The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
Yeah, in terms of the race, I feel like most pundits are choosing The Boy, the Mole with Ice Merchants, because I think Ann Thompson of IndieWire might be predicting Ice Merchants, or just saying like to watch out for Ice Merchants. It did win one of the Annie Awards. For like, I think it was competing in a different category than the boy, keep saying the bull, the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. And so it's like they haven't gone like they each won a different Annie award. And so it's like kind of like, that's why those two I think are to some people are the front runner. But yeah, my Year of Dicks also for the title. But I think also because I feel like a couple people had solid arguments for why this one should, it's someone who's one, like a producer or something like that would attract people potentially. But yeah, and that like, so it to me, a lot of the conversation about predicting this category was around, are they going to go for the sort of more kind of the quirkier, artsier pick, or are they going to go for the more, for lack of a better word, sort of corporate, like crowd pleaser, sort of like broader appeal short. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, and just to make obvious what you just said, so often it just takes one famous name, and I think we're going to probably talk about that in a couple of these to come, where one famous name that people can say, oh, I'll vote for my friend, and I don't get to participate in For Leslie discourse, but it seems that the kind of way that nomination happened also was used on some short films last year in a related category. So so I think if you're well connected, that can really help you in this category, because I don't think it takes all that many votes to really get ahead of the rest.
No, that's fair. For sure. All right. So next up we have live. Are we doing live action short? I think that's.
You said documentary after that.
Oh, documentary. Thank you. I switched them, but I think my notes have not updated from when I was like texting you earlier when we were planning this on my phone. So yeah, documentary short. Yes. So the nominees are The Elephant Whisperers, which is on Netflix, Haul Out, which I watched on the New Yorker.
Yep.
How Do You Measure a Year, which I actually could not watch. I think that's the one on here that's not available. I managed to find a trailer where I'm like, oh, I think I understand what this is about pretty easily. The Martha Mitchell Effect, which is also on Netflix, and Stranger at the Gate, which is from the New Yorker.
Oh, yeah. So New Yorker, what do you got? So many. My will win. So Little Gold Men went for Haul Out. And I'm guessing we're going to talk about Haul Out probably. So I actually, before I heard that, my will win, I went with Stranger at the Gate. It just seemed like the kind of political film that the Academy would go for. It's kind of the, I don't know, calling it the Green Book is not nice. It's almost like the Help of a different political issue. So the story is essentially a man who hated Muslims in America and infiltrated their community with the intent to learn how it was all set up and then commit a mass shooting, but essentially was welcomed with open arms and ended up loving the people. And he eventually, his plot was discovered, and now I'm spoiling the end of it, and he was arrested. These are real life events people probably have heard of, hence documentary. And so it's about basically how he at that point wasn't going to do it or wouldn't have done it, but about kind of what that means. And so I think that's kind of really really alluring in this kind of divided moment of left, right, hatred, bigotry, all of those things. I think that's going to really pull people in. So I'm going to stick with that for my will win, even though I don't think many people are saying that necessarily.
And who's the famous name attached to this?
I believe this is the Malala one, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was like, oh no, is that?
Sorry, I was setting that up so you could cash in on it. So yeah, I think what's interesting is that, as usual, because I listen to lots of different Oscars predicting podcasts. A lot of them are just coming out today, and so I feel like I haven't really got people's final predictions yet. But I feel like the conversation on the shorts often is very varied because no one knows what's going on, because it's like, how many of these have people actually seen, right? Are they going to vote based on the name or on the famous people attached to them, or are they actually going to watch them and vote that way? And so I think Stranger at the Gate, because it has Malala behind it, is the major candidate that people are like pointing to be like, oh, this is like the endorsement that people can, if they haven't watched any of these, they'll see Malala's name attached to it and say like, check, right? But I also agree with you that it has kind of like the short itself has a wholesome sort of feel good element to it, where it's like, if only we could just all be nice to each other, we wouldn't have any of the any problems in the world. And I feel like at this moment in time, a lot of people are going to find that appealing, I think. I actually thought that's what made me kind of like balk at enjoying this. I was just like, wait a minute, like. And if you go on Letterboxd and look this up, it's like a ton of 1-star reviews, and everyone's like, are you kidding? We're supposed to feel bad for this guy. So there's like it's definitely a polarizing film in terms of how you view the characters, but it's very interview heavy. So it kind of goes back and forth between his family and him, and then the members of the Muslim community that as you said, welcomed him with open arms and kind of incorporated them into their community. But I think, so some people are saying that's definitely the front runner. Other people are saying The Elephant Whisperers is definitely the front runner, because it's a similarly feel good, nice story about animals. I think people are still kind of scarred from My Octopus Teacher winning documentary feature. I think, was that last year?
2 years ago, I think, but yeah.
2 years ago? Okay. And because everyone was like, this is not even that good, but because it's like a nice story about this guy and an octopus, like, that people are into it. So I think this has I'd say Elephant Whisperers is definitely better. Like, I wouldn't say that it doesn't deserve to be here or anything like that, but it does have that kind of like, it's a nice story. But doesn't have necessarily sort of like the political baggage that Stranger at the Gate might for people. So, I think that's my will win at this point. Though I have in parentheses Stranger at the Gate ? Because like, and I easily could flip flop back and forth. But I think in most of the Oscars podcasts I've listened to, those are the two kind of in contention. So it's interesting to hear that Haul Out is also in the running for some people.
Yeah, so Haul Out, before we leave the subject, I will say I put Elephant Whisperers for my should win. I thought it was really well shot. I thought it was like you're saying, a nice small story. Actually, most of these this year are uplifting, which is very rarely the case, even for documentary short. So that's nice, in that regard. So I think Elephant Whisperers, just was really nice. And I think, when we're in this moment where we're kind of all environmental conscious, or probably not enough, but should be more environmentally conscious, that I thought that one worked really well for me. But I will say I wouldn't be upset if it was Haul Out, which I think also has that same kind of thematic resonance. It has just kind of a couple of jaw dropper moments that are really cool. Is that your should win? That was my guess.
It is.
All right, yeah. So you talk about it.
That one, this one got me. It just because it was really fun at first, and we can't spoil it.
No.
So it's gonna be hard to talk about without
watch it. Pause us, go watch it. It takes 15 minutes, I think, and then you can come back if you want.
Come back. Okay.
But don't spoil it. Probably. Nah.
Okay. I'll try my best. I'll try my best. So it is about this researcher in the Arctic who is monitoring, and I won't say which animal, is monitoring a species of animal. And it's just at the first half of it is just really surprising and fun. in a way that just cracked me up. I was like, this is amazing. And there's so many like amazing shots in it, footage that like, even from like someone who has watched a lot of nature documentaries, I feel like would be mind blowing still. But then then very subtly and kind of without being really heavy handed, it has this really environmentally conscious message, and becomes very kind of like bleak and depressing towards the end. And I watched this with my kids actually, and they were into it because they love animals, and so they were like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Like, and then my oldest, who's 6, she sort of figured out, like, something clicked for her, and she started asking a bunch of questions about, like, well, why are they doing this, or why is? And I was just like, and so to me, that's the genius of this movie, is that it draws you in, but then leaves you with this really sort of like heavy question about about climate change and the environment, and so yeah, so that's definitely my pick for should win. That was by far my favorite out of all these. Although I really enjoyed I'm a sucker for animals. I really enjoyed the Elephant Whisperers as well, but it was very, very personal. I felt like it was more intimate than a lot of these other ones, because it's following these people who take care of these elephants, and they treat them and talk about them as if they're their children. And I think it has like a sweetness to it that's really nice to watch.
Yeah, and I'll just add to close out the category, Martha Mitchell Effect is a really fun watch. It's it also has some resonance to the current moment. It definitely is something that should become like a vehicle for some lead actress to go for best actress in the years to come, because it's a story worth fleshing out. Something I didn't know about, even though I'm a politics junkie, so it was certainly really fun. And then I'll just say, How Do You Measure a Year is trash and should not be here. I'm often not that hard. Anything. No, it should be a TikTok video. It is a man
that's
asking,
what the trailer looked like.
Yeah, it's a man asking his daughter the same questions on her birthday every year from when she's 3 or up through 16. On the Discord for Oscar Death Race, a commenter whose name I don't have at hand said that the most exciting part for them was waiting for the family to buy a new couch, because it's the same couch that the little girl is sitting on year after year. And like, she starts to be a preteen, and you're like, yeah, that is an old couch. Like, they got to replace that. But it's kind of sweet. It's kind of interesting. I don't know who Jay Rosenblatt paid off to get it nominated, because it's not on level with these. It's something.
I mean, from like a filmmaking perspective.
Yeah, and if it's something I could do in my own house, I don't think it belongs in the Oscar race. So
yeah, to me it seemed like Boyhood, the TikTok video.
Yeah,
right.
And it's just not compelling. I mean, if there's a theme to it, it's that we're mortal and time passes, and yeah, that's true. But we all know that every day looking at our Facebook memories. We don't need this guy's Facebook memories. Sure. Also, it's impossible to Google because you only get rent results. So,
that's true. That actually did happen to me, and I was like, "What is going on?" That's amazing. Yeah, and my last comment for Martha Mitchell Effect, because I haven't said anything about that yet. I agree that it was really fun, and I didn't really know much about it, the story, and so I was really interested in it. But it is, to me, at the end of the day, like a very classic, well done, but very classic, like little known figure in history documentary. What to me, in terms of as a documentary, it wasn't really doing anything particularly new or innovative. But sometimes it doesn't need to. Like, it was just a really good version of that type of documentary. So like, oh, you never knew about this person in history, and it like related to a major historical event. Yeah. All right. So our next up is live action short. And I'm going to be honest, Craig, I haven't seen a single one of. Oh, wait, I watched the first 10 minutes of Les Pupilles.
This is the hardest of all the categories we're talking about tonight in terms of tracking these down. And I only saw these because I went to the theater showcase and one evening sat in for 2 hours and enjoyed all these. Thank you to my mother-in-law for babysitting so I could do that. So the nominees are An Irish Goodbye, Evilou, Les Pupilles. I'm not even going to pretend I got that language correct. Night Ride, and The Red Suitcase. This is a really weird set of movies to watch as a group. I will just say off the bat, because they're totally very, very different. So, anticipating that listeners will not have seen these and that you haven't seen these, I can kind of do a brief synopsis of a few of them. I'll actually take them in the order they appeared in the showcase, which is not the order listed here. Evilou was first. It's a story about two sisters, and one sister, Evilou, is missing. Real standout aspects of this are that it's shot in Greenland, and it deals with, I believe, the indigenous population of Greenland. So that's really kind of a fascinating slice of the world to see. And it feels kind of fun at first, and then it is the darkest of these five by the end of it. And it was kind of upsetting in certain ways. So it kind of was almost a bait and switch that way, but really beautiful. I mean, the classic live action short thing is that they all are just trying to get features, and any of these directors could aptly do a feature. Second on the night was Night Ride, which I believe is Belgian. It's not listed here. Or maybe it's Finnish or Norwegian. I'll let you Google that. But it's a story about a woman who accidentally commandeers a trolley and eventually has to intervene in a trans woman getting harassed by a couple brutes. So similarly, it's kind of full of whimsy. It gets kind of dark, but then comes out of it more on the whimsy side of the case. Le Pupille. Norway, thank you. Le Pupille is a really quirky short about little girls living in an orphanage. The big name draw to this one is Alfonso Cuarón, one of my favorite filmmakers by far, but he is a producer on this, and it's a new director, but he has really loaned his prestige. This is the one you can watch at home. It's on Disney Plus. I have no idea why Disney decided to help pay for this. It's branded up as Disney Presents and all that, which is unusual for a short.
This is a Disney original.
Yeah.
And then it says and has the logo for the Cannes Film Festival. And I'm just like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, it's very strange. And the film itself, ultimately didn't work for me, but I see that if you have a kind of quirky sensibility, it felt like, tonally, it felt like Amelie, something like that is kind of quirky for quirky's sake. And I can get in that mood. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan who hits that register sometimes. The Red Suitcase is a very tense thriller about a woman who arrives at an airport having been sent there to be the arranged bride of a man she's never met, and basically her decision to not go through with it and to try to escape the airport while he's waiting for her. And then the final one of the night was An Irish Goodbye, which is the story of two brothers, one with Down syndrome, and they're reacting to the death of their mother. They discover the mother's bucket list and decide before selling the family farm, they're going to do her bucket list together. And so, that one gets my vote for will win. I think it's the right kind of charming. That's just a crowd pleaser, and, it's well acted, and it's got that right mix of whimsy and pathos that I think most of the Academy will go for that. Little Gold Men picked Le Pupille on the strength of Alfonso Cuarón and just how well made and how well shot it is. And it is fun in some ways. It really didn't work for me. So I was shocked when they said that was their pick. And my should win is going to be The Red Suitcase, because I have not felt that kind of tense, suspense atmosphere in a long time. And like my heart was racing, and, it was really at any moment you could pause it and I wouldn't have guessed where it was about to go at all. So I thought that one was really, well done. And, there's often a kind of suspense one in there. There's one a couple years ago about a 911 operator and receiving a call from a woman kind of faking a conversation to get out of a domestic abuse situation. And this has a kind of a similar edge to it. It's like tied to a political issue of the day, but really just makes you incredibly sympathetic for this woman in a very short amount of time. So that's my pick for should win. I don't know. I haven't heard it in the discussion at the top of the pack. Maybe you have.
Yeah. So most critics that I've listened to or read are saying Le Pupille. That might just be because of the Alfonso Cuarón connection. that they're assuming, oh, people recognize his name and then check it off. The other contender that a lot of people have flagged is An Irish Goodbye. That's the one. And I think, I can't remember which podcast it was. It was maybe Awards Watch, which is one I listened to a lot. Or it might have been Next Best Picture, but because they have a lot of crossover with guests. But I think somebody said it has been a really good year for Irish film, considering Banshees. And so maybe people will just like, but I feel like even that probably doesn't really hold now because Banshees is sort of falling by the wayside in terms of its other nominations. So, so those are the two contenders that I've heard. Nobody likes Night Ride, from what I've listened to, or people are like not very keen on that one. But yeah,
it's gotten a lot of like, fine. Right.
Yeah,
it's not really like it's offensively bad. It's just like, okay, that's a thing. Fun.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm not going to weigh in on should win because I didn't even get to watch trailers for these. I really did I tried to cram in Le Pupille and did not get very far because Disney also defaulted to English dubbing, and it's in Italian. And that really threw me, and it to the point where like I was like, I got to figure out how to switch this over, which I could. I figured out because at first I was like, okay, because they give you a bunch of options for subtitles and for audio, and so I had to go look up what the original language was, and I'm like, okay, it's in Italian. Let me switch it to that. Oh yeah, this is so much better. But then I couldn't finish it. So I think if you are watching on Disney Plus, and I know that their rationale for doing that probably is that more people are going to watch it if they don't have to read subtitles, which is really sad. But it actually, to me, is more distracting if you're watching the mouth not in sync. And this one, it's like very noticeable, for whatever reason. So that would be my recommendation is if you're going to watch that one on Disney Plus, make sure you switch it over to the subtitles and the Italian audio. But yeah.
Well, maybe I'll close the discussion of the shorts from my end and just saying, I think we're seeing the power of the streaming services in these. And I also think like, get on this. Like if you're Netflix or like these have to be cheap to license and get out there. I think these creators will want them on a service like this. Netflix has had the most success and has had the biggest share. But I think, if the streaming services are still interested in kind of racking up Oscar totals, I think this is an easy place to just get a bunch of them. Eventually, I actually didn't check if this has happened yet, but the Shorts TV is the organization that puts them out in theaters, and they do eventually put them on like iTunes and other digital platforms that you can buy, or rent at least the bundle together. And it's certainly fun. The first year of the pandemic, my wife and I did it together in a virtual screening room for one of the art house theaters near here. And the two of us just sat and we watched them all together and we kind of voted as we went. And it was a really good time. So if people have the chance to do that, it's fun. I tried to drag our mutual friend Ben with me this year and he ended up canceling on me, but I'm determined to take a friend and, keep an active scorecard going on Shorts Night because it's a lot of fun to see them all.
Yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do in a theater. I usually end up, trying to cram them all in by watching them online as I did this year. And I think that I really do. I am on, like, I really enjoyed watching them, even though it was kind of hurried and cramming for this. I really did enjoy the ones that I watched and thought it was a great experience. And so I will probably try to put links to where you can watch a lot of these online in our text version of this conversation, our short takes and long takes, so folks can have even less excuse. Literally clicking on a link in the long take, and then you'll be able to watch these. All right. So we're finally here. We've gone through the shorts. We're now at original score, which actually is probably, I would say, the most contentious of all the categories we're talking about today. And that's mostly because a lot of the shorts, people are like, like they kind of are just like, it could be anything. Like the shorts often surprise even the best Oscar predictors, with who wins. So, but score, I feel like has a lot of hemming and hawing attached to it in terms of who will win. So we've got All Quiet on the Western Front, Babylon, The Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and The Fabelmans. So what's your will win? What are you predicting for this one?
I can't even say it out loud without first saying shout out to John Williams. I mean, he's the master and he has more nominations than anybody, which is just a stunning achievement. You and I saw him premiere a piece, this year or last year now at this point. We saw him at Star Wars Celebration premiere the Kenobi, theme. And it's just a magical once in a lifetime pinch me moment from my year last year. And so I can't vote for Fabelmans either for should win or will win. But I do just want to, I think that's where Hollywood is. Like, he's been honored enough. We love him. He's a treasure. We're sorry he's 90 and will eventually pass from this earth. But, I think he's been honored enough in his lifetime. So, I ended up going for the same film for will win and should win. And that is Babylon. This score completely blew me away. Justin Hurwitz, who really only scores Damien Chazelle's movies. I think they're college buddies and they just have stuck together, through Whiplash and La La Land and First Man. He did win for La La Land, so this is not recognizing a new talent. But this Babylon score has been the constant soundtrack in my office since it came to streaming. It is a flawed movie, but I think you talked so well with Antonio about the kind of wish to spread the love. This is where Babylon should and will get it. Like, this is the one that Babylon should get. If you're going to recognize one thing, the script's not quite there. The acting deserves a little bit more attention than it got, but isn't top tier acting. But the music is absolutely top tier. And, just today, I didn't mean to prep in this way, but I was in my car a lot going back and forth to work. And, Justin Hurwitz was on the Empire podcast and the Next Best, Picture podcast.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And particularly on Next Best Picture, it's just a longer interview. So they go much more in depth about some of the stuff they did. And it's absolutely a fascinating listen as somebody who loves music but rarely understands it. He went on for a long time of talking about how, the things that you put inside shoes so that they don't shrink, like you put inside your nice leather
like
shoes.
A shoe horn?
Yeah, but he was saying that's called a shoe tree. I didn't believe him. I've never heard it called a shoe tree. Not a shoe horn. Yes. The horn is what you put on your shoe with, right?
Now I don't know. So I think what it is when I say shoe horn, apologies listeners.
We have to settle this.
Yeah. The shoe horn I think of as sort of the thing that's shaped like the shoe that comes with the shoe to keep it from caving in.
Yes,
that's hollow, that's like hollow. But I think a shoe tree is almost like a mannequin's foot, but made of wood.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, to me, they serve the same purpose. Just one's like a nicer, sort of like more substantial version of the other. But I imagine the wooden one maybe would be good as like a musical instrument type thing.
Exactly. And they were even to amplify the percussion, they were taking those and banging it on wooden crates to amplify the percussion to make it sound that much more propulsive. So, whether you enjoy Babylon or not, I think you have to love the music. I constantly hum the themes from this movie. So, it is very much, I agree with you. This is not a done deal, but I'm in my heart pretending it's a done deal and giving it to, Babylon.
Yeah, I almost wanted to do that. I didn't. I ended up going with All Quiet on the Western Front. But I'm not happy about it. Like I don't, it doesn't, and to me, it's like, cause I have to figure out, like you said, what is Babylon taking home in the overall equation, right? I feel like it has good chances here. It has good chances in production design. Yep. Spoiler, sorry, PT, to spoil our conversation on that. But I feel like it's because the Academy seems to really not like this movie. It didn't make it into Best Picture, right? It actually doesn't have very many nominations. And I think that because of that, I don't really feel comfortable having it win too. And so like, I'm going to go back and forth about like which one it is and then like do a trickle effect of like, well, how is that affecting all my other predictions and try to work it out that way. But right now I have All Quiet on the Western Front because one is that it just seems to have a lot of momentum, especially post BAFTA where it won so many awards, won Best Film. And there's just a lot of kind of like, other than everything everywhere, this is the next sort of like groundswell of support. Like people are surprised with how well it's doing. And I think the score, I was listening to Next Best Picture yesterday, and Dan Baer hilariously said that it was Hans Zimmer light. Which I thought, I'm like, yes, that's a perfect way to describe it, because it has the very memorable blah blah, like it's got a refrain that's very kind of Hans Zimmer, Christopher Nolan movie type of a thing, that people are going to really associate with the movie. And but then the counter argument was that All Quiet's score actually is not very typical for the type of score that usually wins here historically. And so people are kind of going back and forth about that. But I feel like if it is going to sneak in somewhere that people aren't predicting, this is a good candidate. And I think that like it has the Best Picture nomination, Babylon doesn't. And so like if you're usually when I'm torn, that's kind of what's going to push me over the edge for one over the other. But I absolutely agree with you that Babylon should win. I think it's listening to just the scores and not watching the movie, this one stands out as something that I would just listen to all the time. And I might be biased because I am a sucker for anything that's even remotely old timey or jazzy. And this is both, but then also like really weird in a lot of places musically. And it's just musically very interesting, and complicated but also like it's like the flashier, I feel like, score too musically. So yeah, I this would definitely be my should win. I think it absolutely sets the tone for the movie in a way that that works. And yeah, I would just listen to it on its own without, and I haven't even finished watching Babylon. Well, which I can't believe I just admitted. But I would listen to the score all day.
Yeah. Babylon, like other films, should have hit streaming like a month ago, and it just got there a week and a half ago, and it's doing well, I think, for Paramount Plus, which is a streaming service that is way down the list of what people have. But it really should have gotten in front of more eyes and might have had a chance at more awards. How bizarre that poor Margot Robbie starred in what should have been two big awards movies this year, big swings from well-known directors, and neither one really completely worked. But yeah. I am not Sean Fennessy of Big Picture, but I do think Babylon deserves a lot more credit than it gets. It is a flawed film, but I really, really enjoyed it and look forward to watching it again. Although, to be honest, I haven't. I've had a week and a half since it's been on streaming, and I haven't gotten to it again. So all that's in the mix.
You're not in the Babylon hive. That's
No.
the Sean Fennessy has the Babylon hive over there. And actually, a lot of folks at Next Best Picture are really rooting for Babylon because they really wanted to be in the Best Picture category, and it didn't make it. And so there's a lot of defenders for the film. I can't weigh in and out because I haven't finished it yet. And it's not because I didn't like it or something like that. It is just a lot. And where I can watch it because of the nature of the content,
especially that first half hour. Yeah.
It's fairly limited. And I think I've made it past that point. I've made it through all the cocaine and the bodily fluids.
The orgies. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I'm like, oh, this is Eyes Wide Shut, but gross.
Yeah.
But I'm invested. So far, I'm invested in the story seems to be trying to tell about Hollywood so far. So I'm on the hook. And so we'll see how it pans out. I can't say like how I feel about it just yet, but the score, before I watched the movie, I was listening to the score because I usually try to a nice music to work by for me is orchestral music, instrumental music, movie scores. I think that's actually was in my Spotify
top Unwrapped. Yeah.
Yes, Unwrapped. Thank you. I was like, couldn't think of the branded name. And yeah, so it was like, oh, we recommend movie scores, and John Williams was like my top composer. So I am kind of sad that like there isn't actually more support, or people have counted him out. Because usually when he's up nominated for anything, people are like, well, John Williams.
Yeah.
He could get in there.
I liked The Fabelmans a lot more than most people. That is actually one I went out and bought on Blu-ray. I've also yet to watch that a second time, but I was like, I want to own that one because it felt really good. And yet I could not hum a bar of that score. The score is just not as present in it as, something like the Babylon score is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, he's got 53 nominations, 5 wins, I think. So he's obviously fine. Yeah, but
He's
I think
good.
people were sort of, I feel like we've been here before with like, oh, the career pinnacle Oscar for John Williams, but it's like he's just been nominated so many times and won so much already that I think we're just past that point. So we'll yeah. But I think to me it's down to those two. There's the potential for something else to kind of, oh yeah, Everything Everywhere was the other one that people were talking about as a possible upset. Because if Everything Everywhere has a sweep, or really is kind of like maxing out a lot of its wins, that this could be something that gets swept up in that.
Well, and A24 was out with a splashy vinyl release in their store last week or this week. And then they had, if you follow their social media, they had a pop-up bagel truck selling them and Everything Bagels, somewhere in downtown LA today. So it's like,
why did I not know about this?
But those things work, right? I mean, you put a bagel truck on the right corner and get the vinyl out there and get the, if the right voters see a giant line of people in line just to get the vinyl record, people might say, oh, let me give that another list. So,
and LA is definitely a place where people just get in lines because they think without knowing what it's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and similar to Fabelmans, I love Everything Everywhere, but I don't remember a lot of the score. It's not, a key part of that movie to me, but I think you're right. If it's having a massive giant night, which all indications are that it's just going to be an insane night for it, then it will pick it up easily.
Yeah. So yeah, that one has me slightly stressed out. I just feel like I'm going to get it wrong no matter what I end up picking, but we'll see. All right. So we made it. We made it through all the categories we set out to do. That was great. I want to open it up though, just to give you an opportunity, since we are getting so close to the actual Oscars night. Are there any categories, like if you could pick a couple of categories to make either a bold prediction or that you just have something you want to share, some shout out for one of the other categories?
I mean, there's so many good movies this year. Again, it ends up being 54. And I know that number sounds intimidating to a lot of people, but if you knock out 15 shorts, which are only ever nominated in the shorts category, like that becomes much more doable. So I recommend it to people. I think if I had to kind of say a couple awards for the night, that would really mean a lot to me. I love Cate Blanchett. I love Tar. I love her performance in Tar. But if it's Michelle Yeoh, I'm going to just be so happy. And it feels like it might be trending that way. And I'm really hopeful for that. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm hopeful for that. I think because Ke Huy Quan has been so inevitable, we've forgotten how incredible that is going to be. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing him. And, I am a giant Star Wars fan, but I was an Indiana Jones fan before I was a Star Wars fan. So to think about Short Round, having this story and getting this chance, I'm really excited to see what scripts are getting passed his way now, because I'm sure he's getting a lot of offers. I mean, we know he's in Loki next and so on. I guess the last one I'll say is I think Women Talking, as you and Antonio pointed out, got so done dirty by their studio, and that really deserved a much bigger reception. And I don't know why they delayed it. I don't know why the release was so small after they delayed it. But I do think, if it can only pull out annotated screenplay, I really would root for that over All Quiet. I think that's very much up in the air. But if I get to sprinkle my magic pixie dust, I would make sure that got something to take home. And that's
more likely now. So when I recorded with Antonio, WGA hadn't been announced yet. And I believe USC Scripter was that evening. So that hadn't been announced yet either. And Women Talking won both. Nice. So I think now I'm actually switching my prediction to Women Talking for adapted screenplay, which I never would have expected. I was on the train of like everyone's overestimating and just it's a presumptive winner, and we haven't really thought about its campaign overall. But now that it's actually winning stuff, I'm changing my mind. So nice. That's hence why the original score I'm probably going to keep at All Quiet, because if I had originally predicted All Quiet for adapted screenplay, if I switch that to Women Talking, then it's like, oh, I need to fill in some more All Quiet somewhere else, probably. And so maybe that's why I go with it for score. but we'll see. This is the complicated life I lead with my Oscars puzzle.
Well, and maybe in that category, I'll also mention, I think the Daniels are probably going to get director at this point, but I'm still in Spielberg's corner. I think Spielberg has had a rough go. Last year, whatever happened with West Side Story, that was really well done. It was a movie nobody wanted, yet it was incredible, like what he did with that. And so I really want to see him get a late career win. This seems like the most likely one to say, one more for you, Grandpa, not to insult him. I mean, I think he is a grandpa, but, like one more for you for all you've done for this. And, you know, it would really warm my heart to get him, to give another speech. I think especially now we'll see the Daniels again. They have got a long career ahead of them. I recently realized that the Daniels graduated from Emerson College here in Boston in 2010. Which means I was out of college and probably like behind them at the movie theater being like, those kids won't shut up. Like, and yet now they have a Best Picture nominated feature. So, I'll deal with my own mortality, in How Do I Measure a Year, part 2. But, for now, I'll leave it there saying, you know, a Spielberg win would kind of warm my heart, even though that's not a perfect film.
For sure. And then to me, I'm really surprised the narrative for him for this film seemed so perfect at the start, regardless of how you feel about the movie. Like the narrative of the story behind the movie, I thought was really going to push him further. But I think there's just, you know, there's no stopping Everything Everywhere. How big a night do you actually think Everything Everywhere is going to have? Because I think I've heard everything from they're going to win all of their nominations to they're only going to get Best Picture and Director and Ke Huy Quan.
I think Michelle Yeoh is very much up in the air. I think Jamie Lee Curtis really could go either way. Both, I mean, how terrible that Angela Bassett and her have the same performances and the same year that they're doing these performances. They're very different performances, but the same year. And they have the same narrative of like a lifetime of wonderful service to this industry, and they deserve it. I think editing, it seems only like, how could you see another film and not be like, this is the one that deserves, as editing. So I think they're on track for a really big night. And, I think I'm still shocked that it's there, but it's so rare that my favorite movie of the year is actually in the Oscars conversation. And yet here we are. And, the fact that it's going to dominate, I'm trying to remind myself how happy that would make me, because it's been so dominant that it's hard. So I'm definitely, I don't teach on Thursday, so I'm going to slide that in this week, and that'll probably be my last Best Picture nominee rewatch before, the ceremony, because I just can't wait. I'm hoping for a big night. I'm actually going to watch the ceremony in a movie theater, which is super cool. So I can't wait.
I'm jealous of that. That
sounds
amazing.
Yeah.
I did think about, so the Academy Museum, and I probably will want to do that some year. The Academy Museum is hosting its own watch party.
Oh, nice.
Where you can, but it is very much like they're playing up the red carpet. Like you two can be in black tie and eat fancy food. And so I'm not ready to do that just yet. Like I can't commit to that. But it did sound fun to be watching it with other people who care as much about the Oscars. Although with that kind of event that you could, it's dicey. Like there's no guarantee that other film nerds would be there. It might just be people who are looking to
schmooze.
Yeah. So I don't know. I haven't decided about that. Like
Cool.
what the crowd would be like. But that was the one thing where I saw, when I got an email about that from the Academy Museum, I was tempted to investigate and be like, oh, could I actually do this? But instead, I'm going to be watching at home with a bunch of friends who are going to come over and then watch me yell at the TV for 2 hours while they eat snacks and chat with each other.
Nice.
So, all right. I think we're ready to wrap this up. This has been thank you so much, Greg. This has been an amazing conversation. I knew I could rely on you for these shorts categories and your expertise and your recommendations. So that's fantastic. And I think you did a great job sort of plugging a lot of these films, and hopefully people will listen to this and check them out. Where can folks find you on the internet? I know I made that mistake with Antonio. He's not on the internet, but I know that you are, and you're pretty active. So where can people find you?
I am on the internet. The best place to find me is on Instagram, actually, at Ion Canon, which is my Star Wars nerd name. So that's EYEONCANON. And thank you for having me on. It was a privilege, and I've really enjoyed watching the long take grow and blossom. And so since you are my professional mentor in all ways, I will also say you can find me online at ioncanon.substack.com, where I have reignited my blog. So currently it just has the greatest hits from my last blogging efforts, but I have an entry that I'm cooking up right now. So if people want to jump over to my Substack and sign on, there should be one that appears prior to the Oscar ceremony, as long as I can write all day on Thursday.
I am but it's overjoyed to hear this. Listeners, this is hot news to me. This is breaking news on the long take. I did not know that this is happening, and I'm overjoyed. I'm going to link out. You'll be definitely part of my recommendations, because that's a big thing on Substack, is recommending other authors. So that's amazing. I'm so excited.
Well, and I will just say, I'm not trying to do reviews like you. My previous blog was kind of long form essays, and that's what I'm going to try to do again here. And I have one cooking up right now that I'll probably go right after we get off this call.
Nice. And usually, do you want to plug your other podcast? Because usually when we're on mic together, we're talking about something very, very different.
I spend a lot of time down here in my basement. I am a co-host on the Rebel Base Card podcast. We do a Star Wars show recap. So we are currently recapping both The Bad Batch and The Mandalorian for a few more weeks before it's just Mando, and then hopefully a rest before the next Star Wars show. And I also host a Wheel of Time podcast, the gimmick of which is I know nothing about Wheel of Time and my co-host knows everything, and we're reading the books together, and that's called Through the Glass Columns. And both of those things are on social media. You can find them on your podcast hosts. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Thanks for reminding me to plug them.
I think the other Greg who hosts Rebel Base Card with you, I think would have some words if I hadn't prompted you to do that. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Greg. This was incredibly enjoyable, and I loved learning about all the shorts that I haven't had a chance to see. I'm glad this was an excuse for me to really buckle down and get through a lot of the ones that I hadn't watched yet. So, everyone, hopefully check at least one out that piqued your interest as we were talking. And we'll see you in the next installment of the long take. I cannot believe that I'm saying that. I'm planning to record with another friend and colleague of mine, PT McNiff, and we're going to break down the crafts categories. So that's editing and production design, makeup, costume, all that good stuff. All the categories that remain. So we'll have you by then entirely covered. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can follow The Long Take on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive reviews of films with Oscar buzz, as well as new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.